to another edition of the Paranormal Zone. I'm your co-host, Tom Spitalere. Bob is out on special assignment for a couple weeks, and we will be having co-hosts coming in. But the Paranormal Zone is set up to have different people come on to talk about UFOs, UAVs, the paranormal, the Wiccans, and every other thing that goes bump into the night, and listening to different people's views of what they do in the field. And tonight we are very honored and very blessed to have one of my longest time friends in the paranormal on with us again. If you guys go back 48 episodes, you'll remember he was our first guest on the Paranormal Zone. I can't believe 48 episodes, 48 weeks going strong. And we haven't missed one. So tonight I want to reintroduce a good friend of mine who's spent 52 years in the paranormal and going. He doesn't plan on retiring anytime soon. Carl Johnson, the demonologist from the great state of Rhode Island. Thank you, Carl, for coming on, and welcome.
My pleasure. I thank you for having invited me. Yeah, you came out of the blue, and I'm happy to accept. Yeah,
yes.
Here I am.
So
yeah, we're just talking about 52 years already. Wow.
Yeah, that makes us young, doesn't it? Well, makes you even younger.
Yeah.
Well, think.
We were mid-children when we started in this.
Right, just think you're younger than I am. I'm 84 years old.
Oh, you've got the experience. You have the wisdom. The ages.
Wait a minute. No, 48. Sorry, folks. I'm 48. But
yeah, that's a nice age to be. I used to be. That's how I got to be 59. When I being 48. That's how I got to be. Yeah, that's how I got to be 48, 49, and I wouldn't have been able to make it to 49 if it weren't 48.
Correct.
It's a good age to be.
It is.
Yeah.
And so, Carl, you've been doing this a long time. You've published a book or two, correct? Let's start on your
I have one book. It's been a long time in coming, but I'm diligently working on my second book, my second publication. I've written a lot of articles in the meantime, but I'm working on another book, which will be something of a departure from my first one. My first one published in 2016. Actually, it came back from the publisher, started to be distributed in 2017, and that is called Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook.
Yes, that was a great book.
In that, I document some of my better known or better remembered experiences, and give a case history of, my own biography of how I got into the paranormal and paranormal studies in the first place, and how that segued into my becoming a demonologist.
So
I did.
Now we get your first book under wraps. How did you decide to go? Did you just wake up one morning, you and your brother, and go, it's time for us to get in the paranormal? How did it happen?
We used to notice it and talk about it when strange things happened in my parents' house. We grew up in a sporadically haunted house. Most days were business as usual, but sometimes things would get a little strange there. And I'll tell you, the house that's known in Harrisville, Rhode Island as the most haunted house in the world. Well, there were times where our house, my parents' house, was just as haunted as that is, or was. We had strange things going on, but then it would go through a lull, and then things would happen again. We heard a lot of noises and footsteps we couldn't explain. Objects moved around in the house. It seemed like we had an invisible resident there. So,
now,
that got us interested in paranormal research in the first place.
Now, what haunted town in haunted Rhode Island was this part of?
This was in North Scituate, Rhode Island. Scituate was settled in 17th, established, I should say. It was already settled, but Scituate, Rhode Island, named for Scituate, Massachusetts, but Scituate, Rhode Island was established in 1731.
Oh, wow.
So it had a long time to accrue memories.
Yes.
And we don't know why, in particular, my parents' house seemed to be haunted, because the house was actually 6 months younger than my brother and I. So, but there was something about the land, or maybe our personalities, maybe, we high energy children, maybe we created a battery for that. But things were always strangely happening there, it seemed.
So how far is North Situate from the famous Harrisville case?
It is a 25-minute drive.
Oh, okay. So it's a
little
little
faster
drive.
if the traffic's light. I've made it in 20 minutes, but I'd round it off to anywhere between 20 minutes and a half an hour. Generally, about rounding it off to 25 minutes to get to that famous house in Harrisville, Rhode Island. Which is part of the town of Burrillville. It's a village in the town of Burrillville.
Oh, okay.
Just like where I grew up, North Situate is a village in Situate, Rhode Island. So is Harrisville a village in Burrillville. So
nice.
Not terribly far. Been there quite a few times.
So you grew up in a house that had some spirit activity, probably left behind from the property owners before your parents bought that house or built the house.
I wonder, because they bought the land, and to our knowledge, there was not a house there before them. They just had that house built there. And my brother and I predate the house by about 6 months. I think we were 8 months old when my parents actually were able to move into that house on the lot that was bequeathed by my grandfather, my mother's father. Mm-hmm. And the house that my grandfather lived in, that used to be a nursing home. And, of course, they had some deaths there and departures, let's say.
Yes.
And a convalescent home. So I would think if any house would be haunted, it would be that one. And they did have some spirit activity in my grandfather's house. But it seemed concentrated on the new house. And I think it had something to do with my twin brother and me being there. So we generated some kind of energy. It imprinted the ether, you could say. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what drew, because we were quizzical, very interested in hauntings and the like. So I think maybe the spirit there was attracted to us.
Well,
so we can't really know why it was.
Well,
there.
the other thing, Carl, is you were raised and born and still live in the capital of the United States. Oh, wait a minute. That's not D.C. I'm sorry, Carl.
I know where you're going with this.
We're called the graveyard capital of the United States, so you have to wonder what might have been on that property that you didn't know about.
Oh, we've speculated and haven't been able to turn up anything, but who knows? You go back 2 centuries before my parents settled there, or even 100 years before.
Right.
Now, we haven't found any evidence of something there, but, I think it was a farm before, so who knows what is really underneath the ground there. And yes, Rhode Island is actually known by aficionados as the vampire capital of the United States, because we had more incidents of vampires in the 17 and 1800s than any other state. And that is true. That's documented.
Correct.
Now, the cause can be debated. The cause of the suspected vampires, that can be debated. But the fact is, many graves were opened, exhumed, under suspicion of vampirism.
That is correct. And there were plenty of graveyards still being uncovered in Rhode Island.
Ooh, yes.
Today.
Yeah, you have to wonder if it's a residual energy to it.
Yeah, so, it is...
We were delighted to find that out.
Right. So at a very young age, you lived in a haunted house. You were intrigued by the paranormal, like most of us are that start that age group.
Yes, that's how.
So what was the breaking point that you went from being intrigued? And I know you have your twin brother, Carl, so you probably did it. You did it together. So what age bracket did you go, okay, I'm done with the intrigue. Let's go find out what's out there?
The age of 17.
Oh, very young age. Okay.
Yeah. When we started it. Actually, we were starting to do I could even go back further, because our way of paranormal investigating back when we were 14 years old was to speak on a Ouija board and talk to spirits and try our hand at automatic writing, see if the spirits would, experiments like that. So we were experimenting with those, experimenting with spirit contact, means of spirit contact, when we were 14 years of age. Although my brother was more reticent, more cautious about it than was I. I was like, anything goes. Let's try to get some message from the spirits. And, I wasn't totally, irresponsible with it. I know it was a potentially dangerous force. We didn't know, because it is the unknown. But I was more willing to try things like Ouija board, play and seances. And but my brother was always there to watch and to take notes. So we started these traits early on. I did not know that we would become demonologists some years later.
Right.
But we were young paranormal investigators.
I mean, let's look at things a little differently. So when you first started,
Sure.
What was out there for equipment? You had a regular camera of sorts. Film camera, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Yes, we had a small pocket camera. We had roll film back then. That's before digitalization.
Yes.
And we had that. We had the Ouija board, although, people were people who were interested in spirit communication. We were cautious about spirit boards, the Ouija boards. And we had that. I don't think we even had the dowsing rods back then. We had audio recorders, like reel-to-reel, small reel-to-reel recorders, and the cassette recorders. That was innovative. That was convenient.
Yes, I remember the cassettes recorders.
They had disadvantages because they were easy to work with, but they were fragile and the tape would break after a while.
Right. With the reel-to-reel, we're not easy to work with.
No, but you think of the movie The Conjuring, the first entry in that series. You see Ed and Lorraine Warren, with their reel-to-reel recorder as they're investigating the parents' house.
Right.
Yes.
No, it's always interesting. And now today there's more equipment than you know what to do with. I mean, that's the best way of putting it at this point. So you started off with a 110 film camera.
Yep.
And
that is what it was, 110 film. Film and all that.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, and off you were. So you started off investigating at about 15, 16, and then really got into it at 17.
I say that's accurate, yes.
So when was the big break?
Around 17, we pretty much knew what we were aiming for with ghost hunting and paranormal research. I never really called it ghost hunting, but ghost hunting was actually a term coined by Hans Holzer. And, of course, quite a few years later, it became the title of a television series on reality television.
Right.
Called Ghost Hunters. But actually, it was Hans Holzer who came up with ghost. Hans Holzer came up with the term parapsychology and the term ghost hunting. Yeah, he coined a few of those.
Well, he was probably the first big, real researcher in the field. Is that pretty accurate?
Also, J.B. Ryan, who used to be with Drake University, and that became that became the Ryan Center, named after him. Actually, it was just a foyer in the university, and they call it the Ryan Center now because it's carrying on Ryan's research, J.B. Ryan's research into paranormal studies, the studies of the mind, the lesser-known and speculative propensities of the mind, the human mind, like what the mind can produce, and communication with spirits, and trying to establish some commonalities, trying to substantiate, really, life after death, and that spirits can be intelligent and communicate with us. That's the heart of parapsychology.
Okay.
Even the term, you don't really have scientific or medical terms for this because parapsychology means kind of psychology, quasi-psychology. So, it's like I said, there's not a lot of science. There's really no scientific terminology applied to the study of spirits. Mm-hmm. And what do we call them? We call them ghosts. We call them spirits, discarnate entities.
Right. Demons, parasites, and we'll get into that later on.
As legitimate as possible, yeah. So that's what we started with. In fact, before everybody was saying paranormal, back in the 1970s and the later 1960s, at the time of the occult revival, and getting into the 1970s, we all said parapsychology. That's before people were saying the paranormal, and that's kind of a misnomer. The paranormal. Are you interested in the paranormal? Do you do the paranormal? Paranormal it's not so much a noun as it is a verb. Like people say the paranormal. Paranormal just means anything really unusual, and usually is applied to spirits, ghosts. Parapsychology tries to legitimize that study. But we weren't saying that back in 1972. We were saying 1973. We said parapsychology.
Right. And there was a lot.
You remember? Well, you're a little young to remember exactly that. But
exactly. Yeah, I know all about it because of the research that I've done. I was born in '76. Right, yeah. I'm a '76 baby.
Yeah, then you know how that progressed.
Yep.
I was a member of a group established at Rhode Island College. It was called Pyro, and we used the term parapsychology in that. Parapsychological Investigatory and Research Organization. Well, that sounds legitimate, doesn't it?
It does.
But we were under the auspices, although not the funding. They didn't give us money. But we were under the auspices of Rhode Island College in Providence.
Right.
So, and that's I joined that group, and that's how we started going out on actual cases. We did outdoors things, like sites that were reputed to be haunted, abandoned buildings and all. But our first residential case, where we actually went to somebody's home and tried to establish what was happening in their house and have them consult with us. The first residence case we handled was the Paranormal House in Harrisville, and of course, 40 years later, that became the subject of a movie titled The Conjuring.
Correct.
That was the Perrins family. So that was our first residential case. As Pyro.
Wow, that's quite the case to have your first case.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't know how prestigious it would be in times to come.
Right.
How well known it would be. We were pretty able, pretty good for the times. Looking back, and even then, I knew we were making some mistakes, but it was testing ground and learning. But it was because it was kind of a high school mentality, you might say. We were conducting a scientific investigation to the best of our abilities with our limited equipment at the time.
Right.
So we did okay with that. Yeah.
So
that was how Keith got into it, my brother Keith.
Yeah. So when you first went to the Perrone house, was there anything interesting that you can remember or you can talk about even?
Yes, I can. It's not like we went in there and like, wow, this house is unbelievable. They did have activity, yes. I think the cause of that haunted activity was more the residents, the Perrone family, more than it was actual, pre-existing spirit presences. Whatever was there, they brought it out to the max. The parent family that was living there. And things did happen. When I look back, it's not so startling as we thought at the time, because we were eager to experience anything, any kind of haunting. Well, we did get a dose of the unexpected. There were shadow figures there in the house. We did notice them. We saw them too many times to doubt there was something there. They looked like people walking around. You see it out of the corner of your eye. You'd see a shadow moving. Like, what is that? And then it would kind of fade back into the wall.
Right.
It happened again and again. So we do have spirit activity there. And it was really affecting Carolyn Perron, the lady of the house, when she and Roger owned that house. She was actually, it was drawing her vital energies, whatever was there. But Carolyn Perron was very susceptible too, very suggestive, a very spiritual bent. She did believe in the spirits, and I think the parents wanted to have it haunted. It's not that they were victimized. They wanted that haunting in their house. It kept things interesting. It kept things different. But of course we were having a field day with it. But we did conduct a pretty decent structured investigation of that house. And I'm going back to August and September of 1973.
Right.
So we conducted our interviews. We did research into the background of the house as best we could, and stayed there till the wee hours of the morning several times. Now, the last time I took a tour of this house in Harrisville, you can't get away yet from calling it the Conjuring House. I hope eventually people will stop calling it that, because it's named after a movie, and the movie is not reality.
No.
But, yeah, that was where we kind of cut our teeth on, investigating a residential home. And we were taking measurements and taking a lot of notes, talking about the case afterwards with our meetings. But that was it was an interesting time. I kind of missed it because everything was so fresh then.
Right.
And then with the introductions of Ed and Lorraine Warren into the house, of course, everything changed, and we lost our place there. Yeah. You do know the story that our team was usurped and the Warrens took over that case. They felt they had jurisdiction to do that. Ed and Lorraine Warren declared that a demonic haunt. Yes, this is a demon-infested house. We have to take over. And so at that time, it ceased being an investigation, an objective investigation, and became an intercession. There was no more intellectualizing or analyzing. It was just accepted it was demonic.
Now, what's your opinion? Was that house ever demonic, in your opinion?
No, not at all. I never thought it was demonically. And even then, I had a different interpretation of what is a demon. And of course, it's very mysterious and open to interpretation, what constitutes a demonic presence. But I never thought there was anything evil there, that this incarnate evil. I thought it had personality. The house has a zeitgeist to it. It has a certain feel to it, and almost everybody reports that when they've gone there. I felt it kind of welcoming, if anything, but it was eerie. You kind of felt you were being watched at all times, and that's way before they had the security cameras in all the rooms.
Right.
You always felt you were under some kind of surveillance. There was that. And shadow figures were predominant as far as activity. Objects would sometimes move. Yeah. But I didn't think there was anything to drive a family out of the house. Mm-hmm. But then again, I wasn't staying overnight there, night after night.
Right.
But Mrs. Perrin, Carolyn Perrin, and her daughter, 5 daughters, totally embraced the notion of that being a very haunted house. And of course, they would see things and have their own experiences. But I think it would have been much better if we had stayed with it as a team, the Pirate in Rhode Island College, because we were making progress. We were seeing how the house was affecting the owners, Roger and Carolyn Perlman. And then when the Warrens came in, of course, that was our last time there. We didn't know we were going to be replaced. But that was all part of our learning experience. We learned how to manage a group properly, what to do, what to avoid. And a lot of ego plays into it, too, with these paranormal groups. Well, it certainly did back then. A lot of people wanted to lead the investigation, but nobody really led that investigation. We all had our own strengths, and, we contributed those. My brother, Keith, was very good for documenting. He was a picture taker, although we have next to only a few pictures, maybe 3 pictures of that original investigation we were conducting there. So that's how Keith and Keith and I were not known as demonologists at the time. By the way, there's no academic accreditation for being a demonologist.
No.
I mean, you can find somebody who's giving a course in it and maybe get a certificate, but there's really no academia, no certification for being a demonologist. A demonologist is somebody who has an interest in the study of demonic forces and the history of demons.
So, what age?
I call it the systematized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits.
All right. So, what age were you when you said, "I'm going to go down this"? And really get into looking into what demonology is?
Well, it hardly seemed like I chose that because after time, early on, in fact, every case I was alerted to had the criteria of a demonic haunt. Because although I never thought it was a demonic haunt at the Perron house in Harrisville, Rhode Island, Round Top Road, I never thought that was all that insidious. Got a lot of press saying it, but it really wasn't demonic at all. But my next case, after residential case, I should say, was a full-blown demonic possession situation.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, then I was talking about going out of the frying pan into the fire. Then I went into a demonic case, and the subject was a 14-year-old boy in Providence, Rhode Island. And I was able to assist with that, and that was also quite a learning process. Now I attribute a lot of that to the boy's psychology, and there was genuine paraphenomenon there going. That thing, objects moved, walls were banged. The boy did things that should have been physically impossible for him. There was levitation. There was mysterious bleeding. Yeah. Now all of this, I believe, the boy's subconscious produced to make it real. Now, this is not to say absolutely that there wasn't an entity involved or some kind of spirit. I believe there was, but the boy was the catalyst for that. You know, He was going through being 13 years of age. The boy was going through a formative stage. He was establishing his own sense of self and going through, an adjustment period of adolescence. And I think that's what, besides his not his stepmother, but an aunt of his, not a blood relation, but an aunt of his, was Santerean. And she was a mentor to him. So I think her influence, the story she told this boy, and the fact that he was struggling with his own identity, own sense of self, adjusting, growing in formative years, I think that's what contributed to this demonic haunting. Now, I could write a whole report on it. I do touch on it in my book. But I want to write more on that in my next book, why this was, I believe, a demonic haunting, why the boy seemed possessed. We also keep in mind that the movie The Exorcist had come out, and not long before then. And then the public was informed, what is a demon? What is a demonic haunt? What is demonology? We got that was conceptualized back then during the 1970s. Mm-hmm. And the case I'm talking to with the possessed boy, that took place in 1980 and 1981. So, of course, the movie The Exorcist was well known, and there was more of an awareness. People did believe more in demonic possession at that time. The house is still there. I haven't seen the people involved in many years. But, kept in touch for a while afterwards. By the way, that was a successful investigation and expulsion. The demonic entity, the supposed demonic entity, was cast out, and peace was restored to the house. So they don't always end well.
No, well, that's good. At least that one ended well.
It did, and so I don't mind talking about it. I'll show you more about that in my next book. Come up with several options for titles, but I'll settle on one of them.
Right. Now, we talk about demons and, and different...
That's why we're here.
Right.
Yeah.
And different things going on in the paranormal that could be demonic and may not be demonic. Now, there are times out there when you get something that might be a little close to demonic. There are different levels of these, because there's actually a book you can buy. I don't know if you've probably seen it. You probably could write the book, Carl. The Levels of Demonology. All these different levels and names. How many levels do you believe that you would deal with? I mean, if you look at it, there's 100 levels, and each sub-level's got its own subculture, to a subculture, to a subculture, to a subculture. I mean, there's this whole thing on this.
Well, of course, it all depends on one's interpretation and what they've studied. There are, of course, grimoires from the the Middle Ages. They go right back to the 14th century, 15th. There were treaties on demons and how they were believed in that. And the conception of a demon from, let's say, the year 1300 would differ by the time you get to the 1500s. But those magic was believed in quite literally. And it was thought during this time of the, what we refer to now as the Middle, perhaps in the future will be referred to as Middle Ages. But you're talking about the Middle Ages from 1300 to maybe 1550. But then you're well into the Renaissance, the Age of Enlightenment. But it was believed that there were potent spirits that could be summoned, ill-advised too, because they were wild, difficult or impossible to control, and those were generally the demons. They could be summoned for material gain. And, so that had a lot to do with the formation of demonology. And interesting to say that people's conception at large, people are interested in such things, the conception of a demon, a wily evil spirit or irascible spirit, has not changed much since the Middle Ages, since those centuries. You know, people still feel a demon is a spawn of hell, an evil spirit, and even the name demon is kind of scary it resonates when you say it. It's scary to contemplate. But, so if you believed in the reality, the empiric reality of demons in the 1300s, probably not so much different today. You know, I mean, of course, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, has the interpretation of demons as fallen spirits, perhaps even fallen angels. You know, so, and that's pretty much the interpretation of demons, the standardized interpretation. I mean, I have my own ideas on what causes these things. But it's interesting that persons still have an interest in demonology, in demons. If I have a mission, I suppose, with demonology, it is to bring demonology out of the cobwebs of medieval thinking, dust it off, and legitimize it as a study. You know, why do people feel there are demons? Why do people feel there are these malicious spirits? Why are they bothering persons? You know, what can be done if somebody is plagued by a demon? You know, I want to address these questions. I want to look at it in an objective light, if that can be.
Well,
I didn't start calling myself a demonologist right away. I mean, so I was involved in that demonic possession case in 1980, 1981. And then my name appeared in an article about Ed and Lorraine Warren, and I was referred to as Carl Johnson, the demonologist from Rhode Island. And I thought, well, okay, that sounds good. I'll be the demonologist. And if somebody disagrees that I'm a demonologist, that's fine. I don't need to be. But, like I said, there's no real accreditation for being a demonologist. Even in Rome, in Italy, there are exorcists, they're always a priest, and they are trained in performing exorcisms. Now, they could be considered demonologists, but they don't call themselves demonologists. That's just a study. You know, it's not so much you become a demonologist as you study demonology. You know? That's just it's a reference term. Sometimes a convenient one.
Very interesting.
I find it so, yeah.
Very, very interesting. So...
yes, go on.
So, you basically were called a demonologist. This started over an article in a newspaper, is how it all started.
It was a magazine article. Yeah, and I did work with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I lectured with them a few times and investigated with them, of course, when we did the house in Harrisville. I do resist calling that, even though I've said it a few times during this interview, I resist calling that house, that dwelling, the Conjuring House. It's just so hackneyed and it's to promote ticket sales. Is why they started calling it the Conjuring House. And of course, it was just named after the movie, the James Wan movie film.
Correct.
And yeah, and I did enjoy the movie though, The Conjuring, and I've seen all three entries. And The Conjuring, the first one, it featured Patrick Wilson as Ed Warren and Vera Farmiga as Lorraine Warren. And they do play good parts, just very inaccurate, but it's enjoyable films. Some of it, though, I was watching that movie, some of it made me nostalgic. There's that scene, I've often pointed out this, there's a scene where Mrs. Perron goes to a lecture. She's seeking help, and she's looking for someone that can help her with the terrible haunting in their house, their newly purchased farmhouse in Rhode Island. And she goes to see a lecture presented by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And during that lecture, they have the audience participate. They ask if anyone has questions. And somebody in the audience asks the Warrens, like, well, you're known as ghost hunters. What do people really call you? And Patrick Wilson, as Ed Warren, says, kooks? You know, and it's warming. And to hear Ed and Lorraine, you know, the person's playing them, it was like looking at the Warrens. They had that charm about them, and you loved hearing them speak together. If you were at all interested, because that's why you'd be at their lecture, you'd have to be interested in the hauntings and the like. And
right,
yeah, it's kind of that made me watching that scene made me nostalgic. Also, when they showed inside the farmhouse in Harrisville, some of that was reconstructed just as the house looked to us when we first went there in 1973. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, with all of this going on and all this excitement going on,
yes,
movies have tendencies to, exaggerate. Yeah. For example, we'll do The Conjuring. What one was it? The last one, I believe. They came up to...
The devil made me do it?
Yeah, they came up to Essex County. Okay? And they went to a small town of Danvers, Massachusetts, where there was some occult going on in a dam. In Danvers, Massachusetts, okay? And they show up. I wish it would be a little bit more historically accurate, okay? This was in the early 1980s. Danvers had a police department, maybe if they were lucky, of 4 people. And they showed a police department of about 8 to 10 people.
And their spiffy uniforms.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. A movie has to be made entertaining, or nobody's going to care about it, just they won't sell tickets. I think they could always do better with the accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
But the foremost concern of making a motion picture is to generate interest in it and get people to say, "Oh, this is scary. You got to see it."
Right. I mean, so generating that. We saw the movie The Conjuring. I saw it more than once. You lived it, but how many times did you see it? Dozens of times, probably. Hello? Carl? Uh-oh. All right, so we're going to continue this conversation. So in Danvers, Carl? That's interesting. Obviously, the ghosts don't want us here. We're having all sorts of issues again. Carl? Carl? That's interesting. Every time we have Carl Johnson on, there are problems. Carl.
Your call has been forwarded.
That's interesting. We don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, it went dead. So, we're calling him back.
Your call has been forwarded to an...
Wow, that's interesting. We don't know what happened. We can't even get the phone to ring right. Interesting. Alrighty. It's always fun when things go bump into the night.
Your call has been forwarded to an...
We don't know what happened with Carl, but we're getting into the Conjuring movie. So on the one in Danvers, we know the police department was not that big. So that makes it even more interesting. What can really go on out there, and why movies do what they do. That's real interesting.
Your call has been forwarded.
All right, so let's continue on the best we can till I can get Carl back on. It's real interesting what transpired. Every time we have him on, there's always some type of problem going on. Oh, now the phone is ringing. I don't believe it. We're getting a ring. We're getting it to ring. Maybe he'll be back yet. But every time we have him on, there's always a problem. Always a problem. That's interesting. The phone's ringing, but we're not getting anywhere. All right, we will continue on with this conversation. But when it comes to demonology, Carl's probably the foremost person in demonology in New England. So he does know his stuff. Just weird what has transpired with this phone. The last time we had him on talking about the Conjuring house, things got conjured up weirdly. So it is interesting what has transpired tonight again. That this phone actually went off dead. I don't know what happened
Your
tonight.
call has been forwarded to an...
Problems with the phones or his phone or something. There's always a problem with the phone lines. But let's get back to what we were discussing, the paranormal.
Your call has been forwarded.
We'll have Carl on another night, so we'll have to bring him back on. I want to, thank Carl personally for coming on tonight. I don't know what happened, but the whole conversation went south tonight. We must have had a paranormal issue happen with the phones. Occasionally does happen, especially when you're dealing with the list of demons and everything else that's out there in the world that don't want to be discovered. So I'm going to end this show tonight. We got a little bit lazy to go here, but I want to talk about the paranormal and where it's going. The paranormal, to some places and some people, seem to be taking a backseat. To the Essex County Ghost Project, it's not taking a backseat. We're in the process of making some huge changes, some new stuff going on, and we'll be out there and about real soon with a huge announcement of what we're going to be doing and how we're going to do this. We're also in the process now of building up a UFO community, which we're doing really well thanks to some friends of ours like Fred Kohler and everybody else that's listened in. So we have a lot riding on the paranormal, and we're very excited about this. We really are. And what's going to happen this year coming up in the paranormal. And this year we're planning trips to the possibly the Hockomock Swamp, which will be inviting you, our listeners, to join us. Possibly even going to Raleigh, Massachusetts yet. We haven't figured out how or when we're going to do that. So we have some stuff being planned. The show will continue with, as soon as Bob gets back, he'll be jumping on board again, and we're hoping real soon, next couple weeks, I will have some guest speakers here. But we're going to see where we go with this, and we're going to continue to grow this, continue to grow what has already been built. The paranormal is more than just a hobby for some people. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle built on helping people. It's a lifestyle built on helping organizations. That's what it is. And to me, that's the paranormal, a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that I've chosen. And I've chosen it because I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed helping people. And that's what Essex County is all about, helping people. And that's what people like Carl Johnson started, helping people. And as long as there are people out there that need help and answer the bell, we will all be there to answer the bell in unison, helping people. So, let's see if we can't get Carl back on. But yeah, it's been real interesting at best tonight with the, every time we have him on, we always have an issue.
Hello, do I have you back?
You have me back. That was weird.
Okay. We'll take good advantage of our time because we know the call could drop at any moment.
Yeah, so...
I was just writing to you in case I couldn't. I did try to call you back several times. I was just writing to you that the signal dropped. We lost our signal. You were saying the same thing that you said in October when we did a show on Halloween night.
Yeah.
You're talking about the house in Harrisville, and you said you lived it. You know, you asked if I saw the movies. Well, I mean, how many times have I seen the movies? And then you said, well, you lived it. And then the call dropped. That's when the signal fell. And that's,
right.
That's what happened last time.
Exactly.
I wonder if there's something to that.
There might be.
There's something to that.
There might be. So let's continue on.
Yep.
Let's get away from the Harrisville house because you've done other cases. What are some of the other cases you've done that have really, you've had to look at things differently than what somebody else would look at? Formatively, yes.
Formative cases. I think probably the most interesting situation I've ever been in as far as investigating a house was in Coventry, Rhode Island, and that was the Marin's house. And that was, unlike demonic, well, maybe you could call it demonic, but that was a poltergeist case. That was a situation where we were dealing with a poltergeist. At least that's how it manifested. Mm-hmm. Poltergeist being a German contractive word meaning noisy ghost or rattling ghost.
Right.
So, yeah. That was actually 2007 to 2008 we were involved in that house. Mostly 2007 to the early 2008. And that was interesting. I don't know if I could write a book on it. I mean, I certainly write a couple of chapters on that situation because, like with the demonic case I dealt with before, the possessed adolescent boy.
Yes.
And and the parents' house, I cite the psychological factors that contributed to the activity, brought it out, and yeah, it was a hotbed there because we had you had a relatively young couple, 40-ish, and they had 7 children, their own, and so you had a strata of all different ages, from a little more than toddler,
Right.
from 4-year-olds up to teenagers. So you had a psychic battery going on there, and they were from a culture. This couple, Tina and Tony Marin, she came from the Azores, the Portuguese islands,
Yeah.
and she was raised with a belief in spirit communication. She and her sister were, and also the husband Tony, he was from Guatemala, and they're spiritual believing people. In their culture in Guatemala, they do believe in spirit interaction. So you got this couple there, and they were volatile. They used to have a lot of quarrels in their marriage, and then there's always, they didn't hate each other. They would just have quarrels, and then they'd be close again. So you had all the children. You had this volatile marriage, and she was, her psychological state was becoming detrimental because she had so much going on in this haunted house. And that was another instance where the house was actually younger than the people who lived there.
Oh,
They
wow.
bought it. And, it was the house was about 22 years old, I believe. The house was 22 years old. And, so they predated the house. They didn't grow up in the house. They only had it for like 2 years at that time.
Right.
So you had all this psychological, this output of adrenal energy going on there, and it resulted in quite a virulent haunting. Now, were there really spirits involved? Yes, there were. But we don't know where they came from, if they started with that house, or if the Marins brought them with themselves. And let's say the activity behaved like spirits. This was a poltergeist with a voice.
Oh, wow.
Actually, a couple of voices. You could hear it audibly. Yeah, some poltergeists have voices. They can speak. You could hear it audibly, and at times these voices were imprinted in our audio recordings, which was very fortunate because then we had time to analyze it and know what they were saying. That's going to be the most interesting case to me, in which I was personally involved. And that one, unlike the other two I mentioned, that one was not successfully resolved. That was like an open wound. That didn't get better.
No.
They still had the case when I stopped going there. But it was a good association, and it was very much a learning process. Not everyone can say, and even paranormal investigation, not everybody can say they dealt with a poltergeist. But that's how I labeled it. One time someone asked me about it. I think they were writing an article about it, and I couldn't give too many names at that time. But they said, "Now, would you say this was a demonic haunting, or was it an intelligent spirit haunting, or was it that, like you said, poltergeist?" And my answer to that was yes, yep, all of those. There's all of those things. It wasn't just one, but predominantly, I'd say it fell under the category of a poltergeist. And objects, what do you think of when you say poltergeist? Objects that fling around, chairs move, dishes smash. That was happening aplenty there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it certainly had our attention, we investigators. I did that case with a team at the time called 4 Seasons Paranormal. And, I don't know if I could say it was an enjoyable experience, but it was certainly a learning time to actually be in this house. Now, as you know, Tom, in many investigations, when you go to evaluate activity in the house, usually you hear about what happened before you got there or after you guys left. Oh, things are banging. We heard the sounds. This was a rare instance where the activity was occurring right when we, the investigative team, were there. We saw these things move. We saw objects like crockery flying through the air. At least one time, a sugar bowl appeared in the air and then crashed down on the floor in front of me.
Oh, wow.
a kitchen knife sailed down the hall. It wasn't spinning. It just went down the hallway, and it came into the bedroom where I was and struck the instrument. I was holding a remote thermograph. It didn't hit my hand. It struck the instrument I was holding. Like it just wanted my attention.
Right.
I like to stay on good terms with the spirits, assuming that they're aware of us. You know, I don't go into a house and say, "All right, you evil thing, leave these people in peace." I mean, there's a time and a place to say such things, but in general, I like to stay on, if not friendly, at least civil terms with the spirit. You know,
Right.
I don't think you're going to achieve anything by threatening the spirit. You know, if it needs to be cast out, well, that's later on in the process. But I like to stay on good terms with it. For some reason, I get better results that way. The spirit really noticed me in that house. Spirit, what else am I going to call it? The poltergeist.
Right.
I mentioned it had a voice. Well, Tina was Tina and Tony were the homeowners. And our team, while I was working, I was called in as a demonologist, in my capacity as a demonologist. And we did an overnight, meaning till around 2:30 in the morning. And we recorded our procedure, our investigation. And you could hear things smashing in the background, or bangs on the wall. Well, we were at the large dining room table, and the lead investigator of Four Seasons Paranormal, she said, "I'm not sure what I should say." And I said, "Ask the spirit if it misses Tina." Because Tina seemed to be getting the brunt of these poltergeist episodes. And I said, "Yeah, ask if it misses Tina." So this lady, Dawn, she asked, "Do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home?" So I brought the cassette recording back with me and listening to it late at night, before I went to bed. And I was just, I'd listened to almost the whole tape, and then I was ready to give up on it. Then I heard a whispering, like, right when Dawn says, "Do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home?" So I played that back. I turned up the volume. Oh, I got something. It's like fishing. I got it. And it was like a sibilant whispering. And when I turned up the volume, I could hear Dawn says, "Do you want Tina home?" And this deep male voice, a harsh male voice, said, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to boil Tina."
Okay.
Nobody talks like that. Nobody says boil,
No.
I said, "I'd like to boil Tina." So 2 nights later, we went back to the Marin's house and with results, and we had the laptop set up so we could play the recording, the audio recording. And I said, "Now, Tina, you wanted us, you called us in to evaluate. We do have something for you. This is your will. You do want to hear it." She said, "Oh, yes, I do. We've gone this far. Yes, I do." So we played the recording. Imagine the homeowner, the Tina, when we played, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to boil Tina." And she has to live with this. But it was, and she went, "Oh, my God," and put her hand in her face, over her face. Yet there was a certain enjoyment to this. It was thrilling to get these results. And, really prove a point that this house was haunted. It obviously was. And whether they were projecting it from their minds, Tina and Tony, or whether Tina herself was, or whether it was an invasive spirit that somehow had attached itself to Tina. Don't know. Or there was a female personality as well. One of our investigators, she had experience with tropical birds, exotic birds, and she had cockatiels and a parrot. And, well, Tina had 2 lovebirds she kept, and she wasn't keeping them very clean. Their cage needed cleaning. So our investigator, Laura, she was cleaning the cage with her fingernails and spraying it. And she said to the birds while she was cleaning the cage, she said, "How you doing, babies?" Well, because this was all recorded, we recorded most of the time we were there. Play back that recording, you hear the girl say, "How you doing, babies?" And then a woman's voice a disembodied woman's voice. No one's saying this at the time that you could see. You hear the voice answer, dying. Well, less than 2 weeks later, both of those birds had died from some avian virus.
Oh, wow.
So the spirit said dying about the birds,
Mm-hmm.
answered Laura's question, and then they both were dead. So that was accurate, dying. Oh, this was a fascinating case, yet not resolved. You know, what could I say? This is what we learned from it. I have theories about it, but we didn't learn how to. Well, we didn't get the cooperation we needed either. But it was so fascinating. That's my outstanding case that I remember. Well, I remember, you know, most of them, but that does stand out. There was something very gratifying in that we were learning from the experience.
Well, that's the most important key is we all learn from experiences and different experiences, and no two homes and no two cases will ever be the same.
Yeah, and I try not to make judgments on them. You know, it's not like I've learned all that much. I've been able to further my theories, but, you know, what do you learn from something like that? Does this prove that there are evil spirits? Does this illustrate that the people are projecting it from their own minds, their subconscious? You can't know those things, but it makes for very interesting discussion and lecturing.
Oh, I bet it
sharing
does.
these experiences. Yeah, I love talking about these things with you, Tom, because your perspective. You're always interested in new experience. You never take an attitude that you know it all, even though you do have a lot of experience. You're always wanting to hear somebody else's situation, somebody else's case.
Well, because it's it's always been interesting to me to listen in and learn from the people who have been there longer than me. You know?
And every time I think I've heard it all, like, well, I've been into this long enough.
Right.
You know, somebody will come up with their situation, their story, and it fascinates me all over again. Renews my interest.
Well, and the thing is, there's not many people left either. I mean, last year we lost the godfather of the paranormal. I mean, he hasn't been able to be replaced, nor will he ever be replaced. And that's our your cousin and my good friend Paulino. I still.
Oh yes.
I mean,
Paulino, and again, I always felt bad that I was not able to make it to his funeral. My car had an issue for one thing, and I had so many things I had to do that day, and I didn't want to press it. But yes, Paul Eno, of course, bless him. He was a superb investigator and writer.
Oh,
yes, I think.
We used to spend hours on the phone talking, him and I, hours talking about different things in the paranormal. I learned so much from him.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great loss to us. And I thought, if there's such a thing, I thought he was too young to leave us.
Way too young. Too young. You two were first cousins, right? If I remember correctly?
Yes, turned out we were.
And the other thing we got to leave this. We're gone a little over, but we did lose some time, so I'll have it all meshed in and sound nicely.
I certainly don't mind going a little extra.
Right. So, but there's something we didn't really talk about. It's not the paranormal per se, but you have a paranormal background, you and your brother, you and your twin brother, and your cousin Paul had a paranormal background. But you were also descendants of somebody who was very famous writer, weren't you? If I remember correctly.
Well, I'll say related to this person, not direct descendant, but very closely related. In the way that I was related to Paul F. Eno. Yes, H.P. Lovecraft. The horror writer from Providence, Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm. And
my second cousin.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting family tree you got there.
I am actually quite, I don't know if I'll say proud of that. I'm actually satisfied with it. It's nice to know. But that's okay. I don't make too much of a big deal of it because he never called me.
No. Well, he does talk to you once a year. I mean, you do see him once a year, don't you?
I do. Yes, I do. An annual convocation, an annual literary tribute. On this past Saturday, I did a tribute in the library, a literary tribute to Edgar Allan Poe, who spent some time in Rhode Island. And H.P. Lovecraft, once a year, generally in April, we go to the gravesite. My friends and my brother, my friend Christian Tobler, a historian from Oxford, Connecticut, and he presides as our MC, and myself and my brother and others. See, I'm a member of the Poe and Lovecraft Society of Rhode Island. And, so check that website out on, reliable Facebook. We give these tributes a few times a year, and it brings people together. Some of these folks I don't see but once during the...
Right, and what's interesting is one year we did go to that tribute. A couple times I went out.
You were there.
And one year we actually had, we believe Lovecraft might have shown up. When we were out,
we have.
Out in front of the thing you go look at the stars, where you start your event at usually. Yeah. One year, the planetarium.
That's right, the Ladd Observatory.
The Ladd Observatory,
we did that for a number of years at the Ladd Observatory, and then would go to the Swan Point Cemetery where Lovecraft is interred.
Right.
Now we've gone back to doing, the observatory is not so accessible as it was, so now we go back to the cemetery for the whole of the tribute. And, my cousin H.P. Lovecraft. By the way, he had a good reason for not calling me. He died in 1937.
Yeah. You weren't born yet.
I wasn't yet born, although they did have telephones.
Right.
I'd like to get a mobile phone call from H.P. Lovecraft, and that would always be welcome. Yeah.
All right, Carl. Well,
it would be interesting.
Well, Carl, I want to thank you for coming on. We'll have to have you back on again down the road.
It's my pleasure. We always just start talking. We get conversive. And,
I know.
It's very enjoyable to be on your show.
You
ask the right questions. I appreciate it.
No problem, Carl. I want to thank Carl for coming on and having a great show with us again. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in across the great global planet, Europe, Russia, Ireland, you name it. We have listeners from all over the world.
No, they are known out there.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the next Lovecraft tribute we'll do, the next Lovecraft service of tribute will be in Swan Point Cemetery, Providence, Rhode Island, on Sunday, April 6th.
All righty. Sunday, April 6th, Swan Point.
Listening in can make it. You get in touch. The Poe and Lovecraft Society of Rhode Island will have the information.
All righty. I want to thank you, Carl, for coming on. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And we'll see you next week. There's the Paranormal Zone. And we'll see you next week.
Paranormal Zone.
Yep. Good night, everybody. I'm heading back to my crypt.